Brülosophy contributor Alex Shanks-Abel isn't exactly known for sticking to convention. Take this blue beer creation, for example. Alex mashed the beer with double the amount of grain required, used a mystery yeast strain, sampling it every 4 hours in starter form no less, and just for fun, dyed the beer with blue spirulina. Why? How? And most importantly, was it drinkable? I have so many questions. Let's bring Alex in to get some answers. This episode is sponsored by More Beer. More on them in a bit. Okay, so Alex, I've been reviewing your brew day footage, and I've seen things in there that I don't think I've ever seen before.
Yeah, I can't say they're things I've done before myself.
We should explain why you were brewing this beer. This was part of the Franken Brew series with the brew club. You were sent some mystery yeast, and the idea was for you just to build a beer so that you could identify what the yeast strain was, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, in the grain bill itself, you'll see that it ends up being, although I did some odd things like drinking starter and adding spirulina, the ultimate goal of this was to try to make sure that I could guess what this yeast strain was in this little game that our club has been playing.
Yeah, it was such a fun thing to do. I brewed my own beer, and my goodness, mine was boring compared to yours. So let's talk through how you actually brewed this thing. And let's just start with the brew day, which itself was pretty unconventional, right?
Yeah, I suppose so. I wanted to get every opportunity I could to guess what the heck this yeast strain was. So in order to do that, I figured I want to be tasting this yeast not only just in the final product, but while it was working its way through the starter too. I have no fucking clue. Yeah, I ended up making a really quick and easy starter with 1 pound of grain, 1 gallon of distilled water, and splitting that off into 3 different Nalgene bottles. One of them to be a flask to dump into the beer, another one to harvest in case I liked the strain, and a third one that was basically just this 48-ounce Nalgene bottle that would be my drinking companion for the next week or so. About every few hours throughout the day, whenever I passed by the kitchen, I took a sip from this starter to see if I could learn anything useful.
This is insanity. I have never looked at a yeast starter and thought, I'm going to give that a try. I mean, what does it taste like?
Well, I realized before this brew day that I probably should have been drinking yeast starters beforehand because I was convinced that I was getting something sour because the first time I tasted it, I was just kind of getting this very clean, what I thought was a lactic acidy flavor. I do get a little bit of a sour tang to it, but not strong enough for me to think that it's a sour yeast. And it started getting skunky and sulfury, and admittedly, part of these strange flavors just could have been from the fact that I kept popping open the starter and drinking from it and popping it back down. So I could have been causing an infection every few hours as well.
But fortunately, it wasn't the starter that went into the actual beer. So there's that. I guess you thought ahead to make sure that you weren't going to contaminate that one.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think I took any videos, but yeah, that starter that I kept drinking out of, it's been sitting out for a month or so, and it's starting to develop some stringiness to it. So clearly it became infected at the end.
Let's talk about the brew day itself. So talk me through that.
So yeah, I knew that I had roughly 7 or 8 pounds of North Star pills left in one of my Vittles vaults. So I decided, okay, that's perfect for just what's going to be an American lager grain bill. And so I went out and measured the malt and found out later that I had something more like 15 pounds of this malt. And because I was making something akin to a lager, I certainly didn't have the hops to balance this out. So I tried to fix things a little bit by only mashing for, I believe, 15 minutes.
Wait, so you went in all in with the double the amount of grain that you needed, and then to counteract that, you just went for a super short mash.
Yeah, I felt like I had to dedicate to the concept of I'm just going to be dumping out the rest of this Vittles vault. I couldn't just set aside, 7 pounds for later. So I tried to correct by ruining my efficiency as much as possible.
How did that work out in terms of efficiency and gravity readings?
Yeah, I certainly got worse efficiency than I would have if I mashed it the full 60 minutes, but I suppose unfortunately my efficiency didn't tank quite where I wanted it to be. I believe I still got around a 1060 OG despite that abbreviated mash.
Yeah, and that doesn't surprise me at all. I've done 15, 20-minute
Mm,
mashes before, and yet most of the conversion happens then, right? That's where
I guess
most of it
so.
happens.
Yeah, I had never done a short and shoddy before, so I guess lesson learned.
I think maybe the boil was the only normal part of this whole thing.
Well, pretty normal. I believe I boiled it for something like 10, 15 minutes. So nothing too strange, but yeah, I was still trying to make sure that I didn't boil off much water and was trying to go, okay, it's a 1060, let's not make this any worse. So I just boiled it long enough to isomerize the hops and call it a day. So by the standards of the rest of this recipe, I suppose it was pretty normal.
Well, don't worry, this is where the normal ends. So I absolutely love to hear what happens to this beer post fermentation. But just before we get to that, a quick word on today's sponsor, and that's More Beer. More Beer's slogan is absolutely everything for beer making, and it's easy to see why given their selection of over 8,000 products, like the Brewbilt X3 uniconical stainless steel fermenter, or the Comos series of kegerators that give you everything you need to get started with dispensing and serving your home brew. And for quality fermentations, More Beer carries Cellar Science yeast and nutrients. More Beer offer free shipping on most orders over $59, and also be sure to check out their awesome YouTube channel featuring brewing tips, hijinks, and incredible giveaways. Check out everything More Beer has to offer at morebeer.com. Okay, Alex, let's pick up where we left off. What happened next?
I just made sure to toss it into a firm chamber, tossed in the starter since, yeah, the gravity of the starter was just something like 1020 OG. So that yeast was ready to go by the time this beer was finished, no chilling, a day later. Because I like to ferment in kegs, I seated the keg lid by putting it under pressure, slapped on the spunning valve, lowered it down to 15 psi, and just pressure fermented from there.
At the end of fermentation, you didn't kind of end it there, right? Because right now, I'd imagine we were looking at kind of a fizzy yellow lager kind of thing, and
Hmm.
that's not how it ended up.
Yeah, not quite. Yeah, I ended up trying to figure out how to make this beer have kind of a Frankenstein's monster kind of look to it. And after poking around on the internet for an hour or so, it seemed like the general consensus is, well, if your beer is yellow, you should add some kind of blue dye to it. And something like blue spirulina is just this really fine food safe dye, basically, that's really easy to toss into a keg. So yeah, near the end of fermentation, I gelatin fined. After tasting it, and a couple days later, I added some metabisulfite to reduce the amount of oxygen ingress, as well as 1 ounce of blue spirulina powder. This stuff, I imagined, knowing that it's derived from bacteria, that it was going to have a lot more of this. I suppose what you might call a typical all natural looking product. And yeah, when I opened it up, it just reminded me of painting class, and felt like I just need to add some water to it, and I was ready to paint something.
But it's made for a phenomenal looking beer. I mean, the finished result, it looks fantastic.
Yeah, this beer's been sitting here for, I mean, 30, 60 minutes, so I'm afraid the head is all but died. But yeah, I brought some here, and maybe I can get the flashlight out. But it's not quite what I expected, I have to say, because I expected it to have kind of this spooky green look to it. But depending on the lighting, it seems to kind of bounce between a teal green and a purple, depending on how the light is hitting the container.
Yeah, with the light behind it, it teal, and then to the side, it really is kind of a purple color.
Yeah, I'd say the teal is a lot more representative of how it looks in person. The purple comes through a lot more, on film.
Now, do you think this added anything to the flavor of the beer, or it's just purely cosmetic?
Yeah, part of the reason I went with a blue spirulina powder instead of spirulina proper is I wanted to have a pretty neutral flavor to it, just so that I didn't ruin my chances of being able to guess this beer by tainting it with something else. And yeah, I did a little quick side by side where I poured myself a glass and then added the powder, and a few minutes later poured another glass, and they were near identical, if not completely identical in flavor.
Well, you weren't clear on what it was, but you had to put in a guess. So, which yeast did you think you had received?
Because of the sulfur component, I've only ever gotten sulfur a couple times in the past. Most notably was from Lallamon's Diamond Yeast, as well as their now defunct Colne strain. So if I had to choose between the two of them, because this Franken Brew project had Haven buy a bunch of expired yeast, I leaned towards a discontinued yeast and decided on Colne as my final answer.
Well, Alex, it's been so interesting to hear you talk about this beer. Thank you so much for capturing all that footage as well, so we could see it in real life. And I kind of wish that I had a pint of this blue monster beer with me right now because it looks pretty good. Were you a fan of the beer at all? Did you like it?
Yeah. Um, I don't know if you would have appreciated me sending you in a bottle. Not only does it look really strange, it's just kind of a underwhelming, bland, strange beer. I cannot say I recommend this to other people. At least Blue Spirulina was very cool, but this beer wasn't.
But the question is, what was the actual yeast in there? Was Alex right? Well, we're not going to tell you. To find out, you need to watch the Franken Brew episode, and you can see that right here.